Hello and welcome to the GP Vahan Podcast. I am your host, Greg. And on this episode, my guest is Dr. Arto Vaun from Project Save Photographic Archives. Dr. Vaun was most recently assistant professor and chair of the English and Communications BA program at the American University of Armenia, where he also founded and directed the Center for Creative Writing. He studied English literature, creative writing, and Armenian studies at UMass Boston, Harvard University, and Glasgow University. He also holds a PhD in creative writing from Huddersfield University. Arto, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing well, Greg. Thanks for having me on your program.
Absolutely. When I found out about Project Save, and me and you are friends, of course, I wanted to get you on and find out more about Project Save. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. So, but before we go into Project Save, Arto, can you talk a little bit about your time in Armenia? How long were you there? What did you do there?
Sure.
Give us a little background.
Sure. I'm originally, from the Boston area, and I was living in Scotland, where I started my PhD. Around 2000, I was there off and on from 2007 through 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And so during that time, I was in Scotland, and then I spent a year in Berlin. And so as I was kind of working on the PhD, I was thinking about what I was going to do, and was I going to be back in Boston and find something, a job that kind of was up my alley and so forth. So I was thinking during that time, I don't remember how, but I remember I was in Glasgow. I was in Scotland at the time, and I saw an article, or I saw something where the American University of Armenia had just started their bachelor's programs. They were a graduate school since their founding in 1991,
Mm-hmm.
and then they had just founded undergraduate programs, and there were only 3 degrees. One was computer science, one was business, and one was English literature, English and communications. So I don't know. It just got me thinking, and I thought, oh, that's strange. I've never even been to Armenia. And
Really?
I had never wanted to visit, never, I don't know, it just wasn't on my radar. Even though my mother's side of the family is from there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. So I just kind of sent out an email to their first program chair, Melissa, and she was very nice. She got in touch. I sent her my CV and things like that.
Yeah.
So basically, it started this conversation where, um, so that was, I don't know. That was at that point. By the time it got more serious, it was like 2013. I think they
Okay.
launched. I think the undergraduate programs launched in late 2012 or
Mm.
something like that.
Okay.
It was very quick when that
Yes.
happened.
Yeah.
I initially talked to Melissa maybe in 2010 or something. They were planning it. Maybe that was the article I saw. I don't quite
Okay.
remember, but then it got serious in 2013. And then when the job worked out, the next thing I knew, I packed my bags and, and I moved to
We're
Armenia.
off. Yeah.
So it was very cold Turkey. And I was in Armenia and at AUA from late 2013 or early 2014
Mm-hmm.
until COVID, until spring
Wow.
of 2020. So like
Wow.
almost like 7 years.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to say about that time. If there's,
Yeah.
I don't know what aspects you're curious
I
about,
mean,
or
obviously you were there during the Velvet Revolution.
Mhm.
That's one thing that comes to mind. So
Yeah,
how was that? I mean, what was it like?
yeah. Well, I'm definitely glad. I'm glad your podcast doesn't have a time limit, so we can talk a little. It's very hard to
Go as
be.
long as you want to go. So
Yeah, it's very hard to be concise about my time in Armenia, just because of both the history and the present situation in Armenia and my own kind of experience there. So I'm going to rewind just a little bit
Yeah,
before I get to
please.
2018.
Yeah, please.
So, when I first got there, as I say, having never been there, never visited, anything like that, um, I, at least for the first few years,
Mhm.
being a professor at AUA, it was the most fulfilling job I'd ever had. I had taught in Scotland. I had taught here in Boston. I taught a course. On a side note, I spent about 9 months, 10 months living in Beirut. I taught a course there. So,
Really? Okay,
yeah.
wow. I wasn't
So,
aware of that. Okay.
yeah, I'd done a fair amount of teaching. But this was, at least the first few years, it was the most fulfilling position I'd had. And, that was because for a few reasons. One, I really did feel that because the BA program was brand new,
Hmm.
it was really weird to be coming from a literature, a kind of humanities, fine arts background, but to get to be part of something academic that felt like a startup.
Yes.
That's very rare. Everywhere else I taught, unless it was just a workshop,
Yes.
as an adjunct faculty or as a graduate a TA, you're just plugged into the
Yeah.
system, right? I mean, these are big institutions, and
Yeah.
so, but this really was a startup. When I got there, I think there couldn't have been more than, I think, maybe 3 to 5 faculty in our department.
Wow.
I mean, it was brand new. We were teaching the very first
Wow.
group of undergraduates.
Yeah, so you had a hand in building the foundation.
Exactly,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
and then
The chair at the time, she really, I do appreciate that she looked at my skills, and she kind of really gave me, a lot of the courses they teach now,
Mhm.
I either developed those courses, or I helped develop those courses, or I was one of the first people, or in some of them, I was the first person to teach
Wow.
those courses. So that was very fulfilling. And of course, the students. I
Yes.
mean, because not just because it was Armenia, but
Mhm.
because this is more of a developing country. I mean,
Yes.
those are all kind of political terms these days, but for lack of a better framework, obviously Armenia has its challenges compared
Yes.
to very industrialized countries. So that was really gratifying to be able to teach students that were so eager and so bright and so
What was the age group?
just regular university.
Okay.
It's just like an American. It's
Okay.
accredited by the University of California
I
system,
see.
the
Okay.
WASC system. So
Mhm.
everything is done. So 18 to 20,
Yes.
18 and above.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So that part was really great. But what I wanted to touch on, though, was the job. Again, this is only the first, I would say, up until 2016 or 17. The first few years, the job was great.
Mm.
Um, Personally, it was also mostly very good. I quickly made a number of friends. I met a lot of people. I enjoyed my time for the most part. I even got married,
Yeah.
whatever, all
Mhm.
these things, personally and professionally.
Yeah.
However, and this is all, I apologize, it's a really long way to
No,
answer
not
your
at all.
question
Please.
about the Velvet Revolution. However, from day one, I went there with no expectations.
Yeah.
And because I've moved a lot of places,
Yeah.
kind of, that's a little bit like my personality. I tend to be a little crazy, and I might make a big move
Mm.
somewhere. But I also went with no expectations because my heritage is Armenian,
Yeah.
and I, having grown up around Armenians and Armenian institutions and this and that, I wasn't expecting. It's just better to not have expectations. And so because of that, some things I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
but some things I really did not like. And one of those
Really?
things
Okay.
was, yeah, yeah. Two of those things were one, as a diasporan Armenian,
Mm.
it was just, I already kind of knew that from just my experiences in the diaspora with Armenians from Armenia. But living there, it just, it was obvious almost immediate from the first night I landed. It's just a different mindset. Yeah, our heritage, their heritage is Armenian,
Mhm.
diasporan Armenians' heritages are okay, all of our heritage is Armenian.
Yes.
But our mindset, the
Yeah.
way we do things on a big scale, on a macro level, and even on a micro level is very, very different. So
Mm.
I bet generally I didn't like that. I just found that very different people.
Was it, were they like close-minded or
You know,
I mean, what, can you go
it,
more into detail or?
well, I'm always a little careful in these interviews because
Yeah.
I don't want to. Obviously, this
Yeah,
is my
we're not saying
yeah.
everybody there,
That's
obviously,
right.
but
That's right.
this is your
I mean,
experience.
obviously, I
Yeah.
lived there for as long as I did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not putting down a whole
No, no, no,
country
not at
or
all.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just find it's a country full of microaggressions. There's
Yeah.
just a lot of
I mean, there's
rough.
a history there with Russian history there with communism and being
So,
under
and I'm going to get to that
power.
in just a
Yeah,
second.
exactly.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep. Hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of microaggressions there. It's just we're just different people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even that, I was willing, just as you said, first of all, it's not my turf, it's their
Yeah.
turf. I'm a visitor, you know? So whatever, that's just my personal approach to it and my
Yeah.
experience. I didn't like it, but hey, it's their homeland, so, I'm the visitor. Oh, and by the way, that's the other thing. I didn't go there as a repat. That was very important to me. There's a lot of uh, this thinking of diaspora and Armenians. They go there and they call themselves repat. They repatriated, all this stuff.
Really? Okay.
They can do whatever they want. Other
Mhm.
people, I don't like that because I
Yeah.
think that the problem is already there that's where the problem begins.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't go, I'd never been there in my life. How am I repatriating
Yeah.
to a place where, okay, my mom's side is from there, but my mom's side moved to South Boston in like the mid 1960s. I mean,
Mhm.
there is no real connection
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
There's a connection in that typical diasporan, romantic,
Well,
whatever
that's what I was
way.
going to say. You're
That's right.
romanticizing it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So,
So, but anyway, so that was the other thing. I from day one, I didn't like this kind of I just knew immediately, okay, this isn't really a place I'll be able to live. I mean, at the time I didn't realize I really would be able to live there for like 7 years, but again, that was just because the job was really fulfilling and my personal life was very fulfilling. But so that was one. But the bigger thing, and this is going to bring us more to 2018, I really couldn't stand just the blatant level of inequality, income disparity. I mean, there's basically a caste system there. I mean, because Armenia, I know what the official figure, they say that there's something like maybe 3 million people living there or something like that.
yeah.
I think that's a lot of nonsense. I'd be surprised if there were barely like 2 million people living in
Really.
Armenia right now.
Mm.
There's a just like here in the last number of years, right after Occupy Wall Street, we have this understanding of the 1%
Yes.
income inequality. Well, so in Armenia, you have people living in the what they call Gentron, Poker Gentron, the downtown of the downtown, the city center of Yerevan,
Okay.
which is a walkable, I mean, I don't know, it's a 2 mile radius, whatever it is, the immediate, where all the cafes and restaurants and very lively, beautiful, a lot to do, all that stuff. But you have a certain class for the
Yeah.
most part living there. That's where the money is. And I realized very quickly that, oh my God, someone like me now, and in the position, I quickly kind of I got all these promotions at AUA, whatever. And as you said, I founded a Center for Creative Writing. By the time I came to Boston during COVID in 2020, I was the program chair.
Mm.
But even before all that, even just as a lecturer at AUA, I realized really quickly that, oh my God, I'm living somewhere where I'm kind of the 1% here,
Mm.
whatever, the 10%, whatever it is. I mean,
Yeah.
I can go eat at restaurants every single day. I can do whatever. And that started rubbing me the wrong way. How should I say it? I didn't want to make less money. That's not
Yeah.
the point. I
Yeah.
was making just an average, actually, US.
Was it Armenian guilt?
No, it wasn't Armenian. Well, it wasn't Armenian guilt. It was just calling it what it
Yeah.
was, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I
Yeah. You
couldn't.
realized. Yeah.
I was being paid fairly,
Yes.
but most Armenians are not,
Yeah.
right? I'm an international person working there. I
Yes.
was being paid like an international person working, right? I was making a US salary.
Yeah.
But the average Armenian salary is something like, I don't know, $300 a month.
Wow. Okay.
And by the way, I think I would even question that a little bit. I think
Mm.
in Yerevan, it's maybe $300 a month. I don't know. But I mean, Armenia is not that little city center of Yerevan.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people making a lot less than that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that bothered me. It bothered me that I saw a complete disconnect into the day-to-day mindset
Mhm.
of average Armenian citizens and their government and their institutions.
Yeah.
They had absolutely no faith, no trust
Yeah.
in government at that point.
Yeah.
Um, they
I think it
uh,
was Sarkisian at the
going
time.
all the way back to
Yeah.
Dead Bed. Yeah, when I
Oh,
got there,
yeah.
it was
Yeah.
yeah. When I moved, it
Yeah.
was Sarkisian. Yeah,
Yeah.
but this goes way back
Like
to
30 years,
basically the
whatever.
collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So there was that. Um, and then what I didn't like is that, so because people have no faith in government, no real connection to government, they don't think their votes matter, this, that, all that stuff. They think everyone in government is corrupt. What's the point? So then what you have is then that, and because there's a kind of microaggressive
Yeah.
culture there, which is very, in my opinion, it's generally a very Russian thing.
Mm.
Right, you have Armenia as basically a colony of Russia for quite a long time,
Yeah.
other than the historic part, the western part that was Ottoman,
Yeah.
the Ottoman Empire for a long time.
Yeah.
The eastern part, it's very Russified.
Yeah.
So the machismo,
Very cynical, it sounds like.
well,
So,
again, yeah, a segment of the
yeah.
population, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's just very aggressive.
Yeah.
It's very so that's a bad combination. So if you have no trust in institutions or government, and you have this kind of Russified Soviet mindset,
Yeah.
then really that means that there's no accountability. Everyone's just blaming each other.
Yeah.
There's a lot of suspicion and lack of trust and this and that. So that really bothered me. And that started bothering me almost immediately, to the point where, for example, I bought a car in, I think, 2016 or 2015. I was like, you know what? Maybe if I had like a little Jeep or something and I could just get out of the city and whatever, right?
Yeah.
But really, I didn't drive anywhere.
Mhm.
Of course, I went to Artsakh. I did some things initially, but after a few months, I didn't, because you know what? Even leaving that city center
Mhm.
was just it was very depressing to me,
Yeah.
because the minute you leave that little very European whatever, very just
That
uh,
bubble. Yeah.
bubble,
Yeah.
yeah, once you leave that bubble, even the rest of Yerevan, which is actually a fairly the city limits of Yerevan,
Mhm.
are actually fairly large. It's not, but the minute you leave that little center,
Mhm.
even Yerevan, I mean, it's just a very melancholy
Really?
place, very post-Soviet, where you're looking at, um, you see people where, I mean, what is, I didn't understand, what is the hope for these people? What exactly
Yeah.
are they, what are they hoping for to happen in 10 years with their families and their kids? I mean, and then the further out you go, it's just, then the country's just empty, right? The
Yeah.
second largest city is Gümri, which I don't know. It may or may not have 50,000 people. I don't know. So, I mean, and then I would go to, okay, I went to Artsakh is beautiful, all that stuff. But again, the very first time, way before all of the catastrophes of the last few years,
Yeah.
the first time I went to Artsakh in whatever, 2015 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely beautiful, this, that. But I mean, even there, it just didn't compute. I didn't understand how, wait a minute, the Artsakh war is not really over. There was a ceasefire. Armenia won the
Yeah.
first kind of major war in the
Yeah.
90s. Then it's just kind of a ceasefire, right? So I'm looking around Artsakh. It's like, wait, what is this? This is a landmass the size, I think it's around the size of Lebanon,
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
It's fairly big.
Yeah.
And yet, I don't know, there's like 120,000 Armenians or something. I
Yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
was like, what is this? How is this sustainable,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Going down the road.
Yeah.
So now we get to 2018.
Yeah.
But in my time there were other protests. There was Electric Yerevan. It seemed like almost every summer that I moved there were various kind of protests. There were protests about historic buildings being demolished so that the government slash
Mhm.
kind of oligarchs could build these very ugly types of buildings. There were protests about the bus fare. I think it was the bus fare being raised. There were protests about that.
Mhm.
Then there was Electric Yerevan about utility costs. So then there was the Sasnadzured where they took over the police station in, I
Mhm.
think, 2017. So, I did see that, okay, something is bubbling, that people are really not happy. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not the only one here. People are
Yeah.
not happy. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
and then we get to 2018. In 2018, when Pashinyan started his walk from Gyumri to Yerevan, and when they got to Yerevan, the first place they camped out was a place called France Square, which is on the other side of the Opera Square,
Okay.
which is right next to where was living.
Okay.
So suddenly, right by my house, this big, huge square, which is where Mashtot Street, Sayat Nova Street,
Mhm.
Madena Taran is right up the block. Cascade, the Cascade is right there. It's a very important square. So
Yeah.
suddenly that was blocked off, and suddenly this group of, I don't know, it started with maybe, by that point, maybe 50 people, a little
Okay.
more, a little less, I don't remember. So, and then from there, of course, we know what happened.
Yeah.
About, weeks later, it was completely unprecedented.
Yeah.
I will never forget. I'm very, very grateful that I was a part of that. I think that it gave me those weeks, being on the streets. I was given a press pass at the time.
Mm.
So I was taking a lot of videos and photographs. And so I was very much just
In the moment.
in the moment. Yeah, yeah. And the level of humanity I saw, and kindness. I mean, I just saw things that it really humbled me,
Yeah.
because I mean, of course, this is all from my personal perspective,
Yes.
but it really made me feel like, oh my God, I'm so grateful
Mhm.
that a whole different type of Armenian. When I say Armenian, I mean Armenian from Armenia,
Yes.
citizens.
Mhm.
They're showing me a completely different side of
Yeah.
them. Suddenly, all those microaggressions were dissipated. Rich people and poor people got together
Mhm.
day and night on the streets.
Wow.
Villagers were coming in with their cars from like the 1970s or whatever, and like, sandals on their feet. You could tell, I mean, just sleep camping out on the streets, rallying. A country where, it's unheard of that everybody's awake at like 8 a.m. being productive, you know.
Yeah.
It's a more European style. They get started later a little bit in the day. A whole country that's starting at 8 a.m. day after day is closing down every street, striking at work, blocking, very coordinated, blocking this street. And if the police come, they quickly dissipate and then they block another. I mean, it was unbelievable. And all I could think was, my God, these people forget the Armenian part.
Yeah.
These people are really showing
Yeah.
what could be done in a world where there's inequality everywhere to some extent.
Community. Yeah.
And that there are corporations and different kinds of corruptions and this and that going on all over the world. And look what you can do, and these people peacefully, in a matter of weeks, brought down a whole regime, and we know the rest, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So now, of course, now for me, this is a very bittersweet memory.
Yeah.
Because for a number of reasons. I left Armenia because of COVID. We had gone remote.
Yeah.
We were teaching online, and my mother was alone in Boston. She's elderly. It was the height of COVID, where we literally had no idea what was going on. There were no more flights out of Armenia. It was very strange. So I was like, look, we're working remotely. I need to check on my mother, whatever. So, but as soon as I came home, then we had, just a few months later, the war in 2020.
Yeah.
A number of my students, our students at AUA, were killed in the war. They were soldiers. They were killed. I had colleagues who died of COVID, or their relatives. I mean, friends. It just was what can I say? I mean, it was such a big catastrophe that even people like me, who really, my connection was tangent. Okay, I was living there and working there, but it was such a huge catastrophe for those people from there and their children who died in that war, and their girlfriends, wives, mothers. I mean, communities. It just was unspeakable. And so with the fallout after that, I've come to realize a couple of things, Greg, about 2020. It really, really upsets me and really hurts me that now, as with a lot of other things in the world, Armenians are so polarized, just like we are in the United States, right after Trump, parts of Europe. It's so ridiculously one or the other. So now we have all these diasporans that, Pashinyan was a spy, he was a traitor, these insane things.
Yes.
And you have these extreme, you have to be pro-Russian, or you have to be strictly pro-West or American, or these insane conspiracy theories.
Yes.
So what breaks my heart about this is two things. One is I'm going to put aside the people living in Armenia, because whatever criticisms I or others may have, those people live there.
That's right.
They suffered whatever. But the diasporans, and including the ones actually who live there, because even when I lived there, you can't constantly be spouting off about everything. Okay, when you have the absolute ease of having money in your pocket. I mean, I'm not rich, but in a place like Armenia, as I say, I was very, very, very upper class, right? And more importantly, when you have a Western, an EU or an American passport, you got to be really careful about spouting off all the time. But in the diaspora, and outside of Armenia, I have no patience, absolutely no patience for people spouting off. None. Especially now that, you know what? I work there, I lived there, I paid my taxes. I didn't even want to be there. I didn't even want to visit there.
Yeah.
If I did it, then you can't have hundreds of thousands or thousands, whatever, all these diasporans who could very, very easily, since 1991, a lot of them could have been visiting 2 times, 3 times a year, spending a lot of money there.
Yes.
They could have started businesses there. They could have moved there. They could have done a lot of things, and they didn't. Okay. And they did very little questioning in 30 years. Very little. They just gave money, they wrote checks, they did this, they did that, and they just cheerleaded, right? And now, suddenly, this one guy who became prime minister, who on his watch, yes, on his watch, something catastrophic happened, and there should be consequences for that.
Yeah.
But this insanity now that's taken hold of a certain, not everyone, but there's a certain segment of our Armenians globally that have just lost their minds. And I think it's disgusting to me. But for me, more importantly, is this. I don't care about Pashinyan. I didn't care about Nikol Pashinyan during the so-called Velvet Revolution. I cared about the people, which is what anyone should be caring about, okay? I cared about a people, and not because they were Armenian, that's just my worldview. I think that, you know, I'm just, it really bothers me that this ethnocentric thinking. I was just ecstatic that, oh my God, regular people that keep getting screwed year after year after year after year for 30 years. And before that, in the Soviet system, getting screwed. They're standing up. They're standing up for themselves. I don't care if it's Sarkisyan, Pashinyan, Bogosyan. He was just a figure. He was the catalyst. Okay. So that's the first thing that breaks my heart. The second thing that breaks my heart is connected to Pashinyan and his government. But again, it's not personal. For me, none of these things are personal, which is, again, the problem I have. Armenians make everything personal.
Yes.
This one's a traitor. That one's a traitor. This one's a spy. This one is because of Soros conspiracy. You know, for me, what I blame the government for, Pashinyan's government, is, I mean, it's just obvious. Clearly, they weren't capable. They were inept. They didn't understand the moment.
Yes.
I think maybe they didn't even think that they were going to be successful. Okay, but they were. There was lightning in the bottle. There was a track record of 30 years of misery. And I don't care what anybody else tells you. A lot of people will say it wasn't that bad. There's corruption everywhere. No. You go live there for 30 years, and then we can talk about there's corruption everywhere, whatever.
Yeah.
If you were just a regular Armenian, not an Armenian living in the center of Yerevan for 30 years and more or less being okay, but if you were an average Armenian, which was impoverished, and really what possible hope did they have for 30 years? It wasn't really improving, particularly, as much as some of them might say. It really wasn't for average working people. And yet they see that a certain tier above them is just selling off the infrastructure, not taking care of the military properly. That was going on for 30 years. Pashinyan didn't do that. That was going on for 30 years. So what breaks my heart is that the Pashinyan government, they squandered, it's like spitting in the eye of over 1 million whatever people of all classes, of all backgrounds, that for 1 month or whatever that period, not even 1 month, I mean, until the war, people came together, unified. When have Armenians been able to say that?
Yes,
they've been so right. They came together, so they squandered that. Squandered that. To me, it doesn't matter if it's his incompetence and the government's incompetence. It doesn't matter. Like, it's all secondary. So that's what breaks my heart. And because of that, in the diaspora, you have a lot of people saying, you see, that Velvet Revolution was nothing. People got carried away. It was euphoria. It's just such a crock of BS, I'll just say,
Mm.
okay?
Mhm.
Because that is also both the government and anyone who wasn't there
Yeah.
who makes it sound like that period was just some kind of, oh, you guys were so naive. It was just a
Yeah.
naive, that is so insulting and it's
Yeah.
so hurtful because it's taking all of that hope and
Yeah.
all of those wonderful intentions,
Yeah.
all of those young people. That was the other thing about 2018. This wasn't the Gharapa movement of the 1980s and 1990s.
Mhm.
This wasn't the protests against Kocharian in the earlier,
Yeah.
this was a more recent, this was all the younger people,
It was a peaceful protest.
peaceful protests.
Exactly.
There was a whole new generation that weren't even born during the Soviet time. Okay. But it was also the villagers. It was
Yes.
older people. It was veterans from
Yeah.
the First Karabakh War. So to just discount that is a real, I think, for me, this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
It's almost as big of a tragedy as what happened in the war in 2020. It's
Yes.
almost as big of a tragedy because now what's happened is you had the war, which they lost terribly.
Yeah.
You have now a complete, now it's even not almost, now it's worse than when I moved there in 2013, 2014.
Really? Wow.
Absolutely. Most people are completely apathetic, or they're just so depressed, or
Mm.
they're so frustrated. We see now a complete lack of any kind of unity. Now it's just people gnawing on each other's bones. It's completely vicious, polarized, personal vendettas, tribalism. I know I'm so sorry. I'm just going on, but that was a very life-changing
Yeah.
number of years for me. And I also think that it's just not being spoken about in this way.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing it quite
Yeah.
in this way. I hear the typical diasporan Armenians either here or in Armenia
Yeah.
trying to put different spins on it, trying to, I don't know, have their
Yeah.
angles or
Yeah.
whatever. Or I'm seeing diasporans that, quite frankly, just they might know a little bit about what they're talking about, but for the
Yes.
most part, they really don't. And so, really, it's just a terrible
Yeah.
cycle that I'm seeing.
Just unfortunately, everybody has an opinion, and it tends to go cynical more
Yeah,
than positive,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. And because what they don't see, Greg, is Armenians refuse to see outside of their little Armenian world.
I
I mean,
agree. Yeah,
I've never understood this. Never.
yes,
From day one, people are people.
yeah,
And if and number one, and number two, I'm born in the United States. I'm born and raised in Boston. You know what? My allegiance is to the United States. At the end of the day, I am more comfortable
yeah,
and I'm more connected on a visceral level with being an American, and more importantly than that, being a Bostonian and a New Englander.
well, you
I
grew
feel
up here. This is what you know. This is
right,
your,
but yeah, and what I'm trying to say is that
yeah,
Armenians, they don't do that. You have an Armenian living in, I don't know, wherever, Boston, Philadelphia, France, England, but in their mind somehow, they were born and raised in England, but all the other English people are Odads. You know,
Mm.
the other people
That's
living there
interesting.
are the foreigners, right? Odad is the word for
Yeah,
foreigner.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, this is absurd. Who's the what are you talking about? You're
yeah,
born and raised in London, but everyone else in London is the foreigner. I mean, but Armenia is their homeland, but they've
yes,
never been to Armenia. I mean,
yeah,
I think people don't understand the damage that
yeah,
does, right? Whereas if you say, look, I'm an American. My allegiance is to the United States because this country has given me everything with all of its problems. I mean, that's a
yes,
whole other podcast.
yeah,
Um, and I'm rooted to Boston and to New England and the community here, both non-Armenian and Armenian. Of course, it's a diaspora. I'm
yeah,
connected to the diaspora, right?
yeah.
I do feel a more of an allegiance to the diaspora.
Mm.
And Armenia, for me, yes, of course, it's important, but it's not more important. I'm sorry. And that's a problem, I think, for a lot of Armenians to hear. But what I tell them is, if that's a problem, if that's so problematic, then I don't understand. Is someone stopping you
Yeah,
from moving to Armenia?
I
If
agree.
Armenia is more important than where you're from in Egypt or Greece or Boston or what, then my God, those people need you. Pack up, take your money there,
Yes.
live and do something, right? But if you're not going to do that, then you're just doing damage.
Yeah.
Because by saying Armenia is more important, this is more important, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I'm in Boston, but my heart is in Armenia. Well,
Yeah.
you know what? Your children are being raised in Boston. Your
Yeah.
cousins are in Boston. Your businesses are in Boston. Your Armenian community, that's in terrible shape now, the diasporan community,
Yeah.
is in Boston or London. What are you doing about that? I mean, this is a real problem. And I think if this is not addressed, and when we talk about Project Save,
Yeah.
we can connect. I can
Sure.
connect these ideas
Yeah.
for you. But that's really, I think, the heartbreaking thing I see right now. It's just very heartbreaking on so many
Yeah.
different fronts.
I really appreciate you sharing that. You were there, like you said, you lived it, you were there.
Yeah,
I've always thought that way too. If you're going to complain about Armenia, this should change, that should change, pack up your bags and go.
right,
Spend money there, build
right.
Infrastructure there.
Right.
Because
We
Armenia,
waited all right. We waited all these years for,
Yeah,
free,
exactly.
independent Armenia.
Yeah,
Well, you've
there,
had it.
there it is. It's been there
Right,
for 30 years.
right,
What are you
right,
doing
right, right.
except this,
And
this,
Greg, I'll tell you, I would even blame. It's even to me more sinister than that. What would I hear for years and years when I would tell, even way before I thought about moving to Armenia? What would they say? Well, not yet. I want to wait because, well, we can't really trust the government or they're corrupt. Oh, I see. Oh, so for 30 years, you get to hang out in a place that's beautiful, that
yeah,
has laws,
yeah,
that has accountability, where you get to have your beautiful homes
yeah,
and you know that no one's dipping into your paycheck illegal. Oh, I see. You get to do that. But they don't. You want to wait before you invest money or move to Armenia
yeah,
until what? Until it's like New Jersey? That's
yeah,
never gonna. I mean,
yeah.
so that's really insulting. I mean, that's
Yeah.
insulting to the people that live in Armenia. Who, by the way, this is why there's a vicious cycle. So then the Armenian mindset, that's already very different than the diasporan mindset,
Yeah.
it gets even deeper.
Yeah.
Armenians in Armenia are not stupid. They know very well that we in the diaspora, for the most part, are incredibly privileged,
Yeah.
incredibly privileged.
Mhm.
So when you go to Armenia and you live there, you work there, I don't care if you live and work in a village,
Yeah.
they know very well. There's always a bit of a disconnect. They know you are on a completely different level. Your background, your years of privilege
Yeah.
has led you to that moment to go. You get to be a ditch digger in a village in Armenia. Good for
Yeah.
you. But so those villagers know that. I don't care how friendly they are. I don't care what all this nonsense. On some level, there's a disconnect there, but that's never addressed. All we hear is the villagers, they give you the food and they make dinner. They'll give you the shirt off their. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, they're not evil people,
Yeah.
but there's no discussion of, yeah, but you know what? That's true, but let's also talk about the kind of there's a colonialism
Yeah.
to this.
Mhm.
There's a weird
Like you
colonialism.
said, there's a class system.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so what I would find is that a lot of Armenian diasporans really they're not being that different than a kind of colonialist.
Yeah.
I'm going to Armenia so I can take pictures with little villagers, right? Oh, they're so beautiful, and they sing these songs, and oh my God, but dude, they're living an actual life there,
Yes. Yeah.
where
Yeah.
they still have to go to the bathroom outside their house and in an
Yeah.
outhouse. They have a well. They have to depend on some chickens and a goat for their food. They have no real prospects for the
Yeah.
future. They're surrounded by enemies, or like
Yeah.
we don't have a real proper, honest discussion as diasporans where we're accountable ourselves, right? Yes, I do blame a lot of things in Armenia, but I hold myself accountable. I hold the university I worked at accountable. I hold Armenian Americans accountable. I mean,
Yeah.
we just, there's a complete lack of a real, more difficult, honest discussion.
Yeah, it's a breakdown of unity, and Armenians have never been really united, all throughout history, unfortunately.
Right,
And we never seem to learn from our mistakes either.
right.
And that's why it's led us here to this point. And whereas what's going to happen to Armenia, let's say 20 years from now, I hate to think, but the way things are looking, I'm not sure, Arto. I mean, and
No,
I don't know
no,
what
it's
you
not
think,
good.
but
No, no, it's not good. Listen, Greg, I would say the other thing that I think upsets me about 2018 when people trivialize it is that, again, I'm not saying this because I can only talk about my experience, but I will say that I, but more importantly, many local Armenian citizens, they were saying for years that 2018 had to, something like 2018 had to happen. So in
yeah,
other words, I would, whatever, I would give some talks or lectures or interviews. And in 2014, 15, 13, 20, all the way up until the spring of 2018,
yeah,
every time I'd say, there's this problem, what would I hear from the diasporans living in Armenia? Uh, Oh, Artojan, that's all true, but things take time. It's going to take time. This takes time. That takes time. What happened in 2018? Those same diasporans that would tell me those things, oh my God, they were marching in the streets, and oh boy, what happened? What takes time? It doesn't work that way. It's nice for things to take time for me, for you,
yeah,
for those diasporans living there from the West. Of course, it's nice for things to take time because we can be proactive, we can go wherever we want, we can do a lot of what we. But for average and below, like working class people who are struggling in countries like Armenia, what do you mean it's a matter of time? What kind of insult is that? Oh, so they should wait many, many more. They've already waited 30 years. They should just keep sacrificing generation after generation for diaspora's romantic ideas of, well, one day we have to stick with it. It doesn't work that way. And that brings me to your point.
yeah,
I would also tell them that, what, how is this? I don't understand. Yeah, I'm looking at Ararat from
mhm,
my, near my apartment, whatever. Beautiful. Of course, it's beautiful. It's
yeah,
stunning. Absolutely. I never got over the daily being able to see one. Well, when there was no smog,
yeah,
being able to see Ararat. Of course, it's amazing. But I'd be like, but do you understand though that the fact that we can see it so closely means that the border is like a 30-minute drive
yeah,
from my house, from my work, from
mhm,
everybody's work in Yerevan. Right?
mhm,
It's right there. At nights, you can almost see like the bases on the other side, right?
yeah,
Uh, or we have a border with Iran. And yeah, we have a friendly relation. Do you know that everyone else doesn't have a friendly? I mean, Iran
mhm,
is enemy number one, right, for a
yeah,
lot of the world.
yeah,
So, and then on the other side, obviously, you have Azerbaijan,
yeah,
right?
mhm,
Artsakh is not a finished story,
mhm,
and Georgia, who you would think should be your friend,
yes,
really doesn't like you. Okay, so I would tell them that I don't understand what's going on here exactly. I'm
yeah,
confused. What's the plan?
yeah,
At any moment, any of these borders could be attacked.
yeah.
I don't have a sense that the Armenian army is particularly powerful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Russia, which is already preoccupied, and I don't think Russia really cares what happens to Armenia at this point.
Well,
So,
yeah, and that's a whole other right.
yeah,
Exactly. My thing about Russia versus the West
yeah,
is that is two things. I think it's hypocritical for diaspora and Armenians, the ones who are super pro-Russian.
mhm,
Again, if that's the case, you should go live there and
yeah,
live in a Russian kind of area and see how you like Armenia then. Two, but it's a fact that Armenia does need Russia.
yeah,
And even though I'm more of a pro-West person, I'm not. There's no reason to be extreme in any of these things. Of course, the West is not going to rush to your aid either,
yes,
right? So they do have to be more pro-Russian. That's not for me.
yeah,
I have the privilege and the fortune to not have to live there. I do not want to live in a Russian colony. I think that's what it is. I think Armenia is more and more officially, it already was. I mean, in reality, it already was, but it's more officially, I think, just going to be just an extension of Russia.
I agree
And
with
and
yeah.
as you say, Greg, as long as Russia wants.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't guarantee anything.
Mhm.
That's only as long as it's in Russia's interest. That's all.
Exactly.
And so I think, as you say, I don't know. You look at the statistics. Every year, there are more people that die in Armenia than there are born in Armenia.
Yeah.
More people move out of Armenia than move to Armenia. I, I don't know. I don't know what the
It
answer is.
just saddens me when I think about it. A culture like Armenia, which has been around for thousands of years, going all the way back to Sumeria, Babylon, Hittites, all of them.
Right.
None of those races exist anymore. Those cultures, they're
Right.
gone. Armenia and Armenians are still here.
That's
And
right.
we're basically like dinosaurs at this point.
That's
We're
right.
barely surviving.
That's
We're
right.
here and we're not even helping ourselves in a way to
That's right.
survive.
That's
And
right.
that's the sad part. We're
That's right.
landlocked, surrounded by hostiles,
Yep.
and it feels hopeless.
There are two things that I would always say, and I think uh, I, I it's like no consolation at all. But 2018 did vindicate these points for me. One was I would tell people that when they would say, like earlier when I talked about the kind of mindset is very kind of Russified. There's other influences, Persian influence. Obviously, we were part of the Ottoman Empire for hundreds, and there's all kinds of influences there,
Yeah.
and there's also just specifically Caucasus
Yeah.
mindset, which is a very gruff kind of mountainous, right? These are mountain people.
Yeah.
But when I would talk about all that, saying that, look, there's just too much microaggression, there's like tensions and just people's attitudes with each other. Oh, Arto, well, things take time. This takes time. That takes time. I would say, listen, I'm not telling you independence is new. That takes time. For years and years, they were Soviet. Then before that, there was the genocide. I was like, oh, well, if that's the case, then what are we even talking about?
Yeah.
If we're going to constantly make excuses,
Yeah.
you know what? Let's not do anything. Let's just sit around. I was like, what I'm talking about are reasons. It's okay to talk about reasons why things happen, but you can't make those reasons an excuse.
Yes,
You see
exactly.
what I'm saying? So of course I understand. And people in Armenia can't be just immediately the way I want them to be or you want them to be. It doesn't. Of course, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But I can call it out.
Yes.
And I can say that, look, of course, Armenia isn't London or Boston or this or that. But I don't care. Armenia is Armenia. And what I see in Armenia is really bad attitudes and completely unproductive way of doing things, unprofessional, corrupt, or just even daily interactions are just not pleasant a lot of the times. Again, that's not everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But it's enough. It's like they say, right? If you have enough bad apples,
yes,
then the diamonds get lost.
Yeah.
The good stuff, especially if you're living there.
Yeah.
Right. If you're visiting there, forget it. Of course, anyone who visits there, it's the greatest trip they've ever had. Armenia is amazing. Well, I can also visit Delaware and probably have an amazing. It's a visit. Yeah. Of course, it's amazing. And you're going there with your romantic baggage and this and that. Yeah, it's amazing. But the second thing is, I would say exactly what you're saying. That I would say, do you understand? Like, have we forgotten how history works as Armenians, and how time works? All right. First of all, as I say, when people are constantly feeling like a boot is on their neck,
exactly,
something's got to give. You can't just say, "Oh, wait, no." But number two, I said, more importantly, I said, I mean, as Armenians, it's stunning to me that of all people, we have no sense of how history works. None. Yeah. I said, do you understand that Armenians are literally a miracle?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Sumerians, gone. Akkadian, gone. Assyrians, almost gone.
Yeah.
Urartu,
they don't have
gone.
a nation of their own. They don't have a country.
You exist. You speak Armenian. You got a country, and you got a pretty big diaspora.
Yeah.
and yet you can't get your act together.
Yeah.
And again, not get your act together, right? Because I know what the rebuttal is. Not get your act together like you have to be like Switzerland, right? That's not the point. But you got to show real progress, not progress in the Genthron of Yerevan.
Yes.
You got to show real progress, and they did not show that. They won that first Gharapagh War, and for whatever 25 years,
Yeah.
they didn't leverage that. They knew that they had to give some of those territories back.
Yeah.
They knew they had to give some of them back.
Yeah.
You got to do those things when you have the higher ground. You're in a position to negotiate. They could have done something, although I don't know, put more money into your military. They didn't do that. What did they do? Well, no matter what, Russia will help. No matter what, the diaspora will help. And here we are.
That's always been our problem in history. We always relied on other countries to come and save you or back us up or whatever.
Well, because Armenians don't know how to choose their own side. But the reason for that is because they think their side is the only side.
Yeah.
Again, this is the point. If they stepped outside a little bit, for example, in that Gharapagh conflict, if there were real Armenian thinkers, think tanks, generals, political scientists, there was no proper thinking. They're just wasting time.
Yeah. It's just Arto, this is an issue that it could be its own podcast.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you sharing all of this. I think I should have you all, another time, and we should just talk about Armenia and Armenian issues.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, if you want to make, or the next podcast could be about Project Save. I don't know.
No, we should just move on to Project Save.
Let's do it.
That's something that I'm really, really curious about.
Let's do it.
And you can also tie Project Save to Armenia.
These questions, yeah.
So getting to Project Save, photographic archives. So what can you tell us about Project Save?
Sure. Happy to, yeah. So Project Save, Armenian Photograph Archives, is the largest and oldest archive in the world that is dedicated only to photographs of the Armenian global experience. So what does that mean? That means that Project Save, we have, at last count, somewhere around 80,000 actual photographs, not digital, actual photographs from the Armenian experience globally. That means we have photographs from one of our oldest photographs is a salt paper photograph from Echmiadzin in like 1860s.
Wow.
All the way to photographs from Florida in the 1970s to, Greece in the 2000s. Obviously the Ottoman Empire, the Soviet Union, Soviet Armenia. So it's at this point not only the most important photography archive in the Armenian world, it's become now a really important photography archive just in North America. It's one of the important kind of priceless photography archives in North America. The background of it, our founder, Ruth Tomasian, who's also a local Bostonian. She's from Belmont. Ruth is half Armenian. Her father's side was Armenian. Her mom's side is from Connecticut. And Ruth in the 1960s had ended up kind of late in the 1960s, was living in Manhattan in New York City. And she had been a teacher. She had done other things. But at this point in time, she was actually working as a milliner. She was a milliner on Broadway. But at the same time, she'd always had an interest in photography and in stories. So she was she got this idea when two things happened. One, she had started kind of as a side job doing home care. There were a lot of elderly folks that needed help, assistance.
Yeah.
And Armenians, at that time, there was still a little more of an Armenian community in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And they heard about Ruth. So she started getting these side jobs, taking care of these like elderly Armenian Americans who maybe didn't have other people or whatever.
Okay.
And as she took care of them, they would become close to her. They would tell stories and so forth. At the same time, the Armenian church, one of the Armenian churches in Manhattan, or one of the organizations, they knew that Ruth did designs for Broadway. They asked her to do costume design for an Armenian play.
Ah, okay.
To do that, she wanted to look up Armenian costumes, like in photographs, like what did they look like? So between that and these elderly people that would share stories and show her photographs, it was really kind of, she found her life's calling,
Wow.
because she already had a love of photography
Yeah.
and storytelling. So in the late 60s, she started kind of unofficially collecting. Then she moved back to Boston in the 70s. And in 1975, she officially founded Project Save Armenian Photograph Archives.
Wow.
So now we're going on almost 50 years.
That is
Yeah.
impressive. Yeah, it just shows you love of something, a passion of something, what it can bring forth. And
Yeah, and real selflessness.
yes,
I think
exactly.
Ruth is a very under the radar, even though she's been part of the Boston Armenian community, uh, with Project Save since the early 1970s.
Yeah.
It's very quietly, just quietly, humbly doing her work, building this, at this point, unbelievable archive.
Yeah.
And she's a real testament. I think a lot of other Armenian organizations could, I think, learn from Ruth,
Yes.
where she really just put the organization first. Nothing political, nothing personal. No, I don't know. I mean, it was just about the work and the
Yes.
mission,
And the
and
persistence. And yeah.
persistence. And
Hmm.
yeah, so it's a great honor for me.
Yeah.
I'm the first. They had an executive director right before me, but I'm the first executive director hired as the executive director, and the person that she's trusted to, she's handed over the keys to me, to her
Yeah.
life's work, and it's a great honor.
Very impressive. I mean, Arto, how did you get in touch with Project Save? What drew you in? How did you
Oh, it's
find?
a good question. Yeah, so um, when I came back during COVID in 2020, obviously I was planning to go back to Armenia, right? Because we were just working
Okay.
online.
Hmm.
I'm not going to get into what happened, because again, that's a whole other podcast, and it connects to the kind of my critique of the unprofessionalism, different things we talked about.
Sure.
But for whatever, there were some very specific reasons, I decided not to go back
Yeah.
in the summer of
Yeah.
2020.
Hmm.
I took a leave of absence. And but I knew at that point that it just wasn't, my time there was over. I knew that it was over.
Yeah.
I took some time. I really needed to decompress. The last few years in Armenia had been just very incredibly draining on different levels.
Yeah.
I took some time. I started looking around at different options for what I was going to do here. And a friend of mine forwarded me the job announcement at Project Save, that they were looking for an executive director. And my friend, who's also from Boston, knows the community very, very well. They said, hey, this kind of, it's you've been a professor, you're a writer, you're a musician, you're in the cultural production world, whatever,
Yeah.
whether it's academia or art. And they said, this kind of seems like that might be a good match, and at first I didn't really consider it, but then the more, some other friends also kind of, it came up in conversation.
Right.
And then I thought about it. I said, it's interesting. I grew up here, and it is true that all these years I've never heard anything bad about Project Save. We all know that the Armenian world is very small,
Yes.
and a lot of these organizations have all sorts of gossip and drama or whatever. And that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. It
Yeah.
happens. It
Mhm.
happens. But I was like, wow, that's interesting. I've never heard anything bad about Project Save. It hasn't been super on the radar,
Yes.
but anytime Project Save, I remember anytime it would come up, everybody would be like, oh yeah, that nice place where that nice lady collects all the photographs, something like that. So I kind of thought about it. Then I decided to just give him a call. And my predecessor, Tsolin, who was the executive director. She was just so nice, and she was like, oh, Arto, I followed you on social media. I know that you were living in Armenia. I've kind of followed you, and I kind of know a little bit about what you've been doing. Just why don't you let's just talk? It'd be great to talk to you. That was kind of it. When I went in, I met with Ruth. I met with, they had just hired a professional archivist
Mhm.
and an assistant archivist. I saw that, okay, that's smart that they're doing that. And in talking to Solin and Ruth, and especially Ruth, because obviously Solin was leaving. So for me, it was all about what is this going to look like? I got such a good, I don't know, it just clicked. And when I told them, and I just was honest, I said, look, if I do this, I'm sorry. And I know, again, this rubs certain people the wrong way. I just really don't care. I said, I'm going to be doing things in a way that's not like a lot of Armenian organizations. It's not going to happen. I'm going to do things the way it should just be done in any organization, in any place. It doesn't matter. And so far, that's what's happened. I mean, I'm very grateful to Ruth. I wish that a lot of our elders, our cultural leaders, people like Ruth, who have been elbow deep in all of the work they've done to build all these organizations. I wish some of these other leaders would kind of learn. She's really, she literally has kind of allowed me to bring my vision to Project Save, to make the necessary changes, and to plant the seeds for the future. And I'm happy to, I can tell you what we're doing or what we're.
Yeah, I mean, we should also mention that Project Save is a nonprofit. So
Yes, I'm so good point.
very
Thank you, Greg.
important.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. From day one,
Yes.
Project Save is a small
That's what makes it
501
special. Yeah.
Yeah, 501. It's a nonprofit.
Yes.
So anytime people, all these decades of donations and financial support from people,
Very
I mean,
important.
it wouldn't exist without that.
Yeah.
That's
So how do you guys collect? What happens? People just send you pictures and postcards
Sure.
and stories with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So as I say, the way it started, and maybe this is why Project Save was able to survive as long as it did, because it started very organically.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of nonprofits are kind of like retail businesses. I don't know, what's that statistic about like restaurants or whatever, like 98% or whatever, small businesses,
Yes.
98% fail or something like
Yes.
that
Yeah.
after the first year.
Yeah.
Nonprofits are kind of similar. I mean, obviously it's not for money, right? I mean, it does need money, but the point isn't profit. So it's not easy to do these things. And for the fact that Ruth has been very consistent for 48 years,
Yeah.
I think is because the way it started, which is, again, she organically started collecting photos from a lot of these elderly folks, a number of whom were genocide survivors.
Yes.
They basically, they had all these photos, old photos. A lot of times the families didn't want them, or they didn't know what to do with them. So the stories and the photos went to Ruth. Over the years, as she expanded, Ruth put in all of her time, her and her small team of staff. They put their time meeting people, fostering these relationships. These are very personal items that people are giving to Project Save. So that's the way it started. The last 10 years, as Project Save realized, as Ruth also realized, that there needs to be more of a shift to thinking about the institution itself and its longevity, sustainability, and her legacy as well. Both. So as she realized that, she made some changes. And now that I'm here, it's the same thing. What happens is one of the first things I wanted to do, we have a brand new, beautiful website. People can go to projectsave.org. And then, they can get in touch with us. And basically, it's a case-by-case situation. They can talk to me. We'll talk about what kind of photographs they have, how many, things like that.
Hmm.
And then we come up with a plan of action. If it's many, many boxes, we might take it slow and start with, all right, let's first see some of them and see what they have, what they don't have,
Yes.
whatever. So basically, I mean, the short answer though is that we are open to any photograph that has anything to do with the global Armenian experience.
Yes.
They don't
Mhm.
have to be important photographs, and they don't have to be historic photographs. Our archivists are now licensed
Mhm.
because there's a very specific way to archive digital born photography. So in other words, you don't, we don't just take like JPEGs or
Yes.
screenshot and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the raw files, the
Yeah.
raw digital files, we can do that.
Mhm.
So really, we're open. I mean, the short answer is the way it happens now is through people reaching out to us who want their photographs to be preserved.
Yeah.
That way, they know that these photographs are safe. They're not gonna, they're not gonna
Just get lost in history
get
or
lost in history. They're not gonna erode because of
yes.
oxygen or different
Yes.
types of elements, things like that. They're held securely, and more importantly, they're actually being archived.
Yes.
Because the whole point of archiving is to make it something that comes to life.
Yeah.
So we are not, and especially my mission
Yeah.
is to make Project Save a living archive. We are
Yes.
not a place where some old historians come and just sit there in some dusty room looking through old photos to write a book no one's going to read.
Yeah.
We are open to that, and I don't mean to insult historians. I'm an academic too, so those are all wonderful books, but we have to be more accessible.
Basically, it's open to the public for anyone who has an interest. Yeah.
Well, and not just that. I've taken it a step further than that. We have to get to the public. We can't
Yes.
wait for the public to come to us.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
the first thing was this brand new, beautiful website that in the next coming year, it's going to be even more interactive.
Okay.
We also do events. We started an event, a series called Conversations on Photography,
Mhm.
where I invite different speakers. And what I do is the discussion is not always about Project Save. So it might just be, for example, I've had one of the archivists at Harvard, one of the head photo archivists at Harvard University, gave a wonderful talk about why is it even important? Why is it important to conserve an archive?
Yes.
And she gave a little talk about the history of photography and so forth. Then I had a wonderful, wonderful, one of my favorite photographers working today in Armenia. I had her, she gave a talk about her project. So in other words, the point of that is so that Project Save, at this point, we need to be championing photography itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So we can't just all be about us. We have these wonderful events, and then obviously the events are by default about us because we're holding them, we're hosting them. So it attracts people. We've gotten a lot of new interest. We have a lot of non-Armenians who've gotten interested. So that's one.
That's what I was going to ask actually. How would you get non-Armenians interested? Because these are just solely Armenian pictures. But
So that's the thing, Greg. That's the thing. So the first thing I did, my vision is that, and you might have noticed, right? I often say Project Save Photograph Archives.
Yes,
I don't
yes.
say Project Save Armenian Photograph. I don't do that because I think, sometimes there are things. When something's been in a pattern, excuse me, for a long time,
yeah,
sometimes there has to be an overcorrection until you get to the golden median. We see that in society all the time. Civil rights. There was some violence in civil rights or whatever. There was a lot of resistance to civil rights. And then you had affirmative action and you have, some of those things had to happen or have to happen because you're talking about hundreds of years of inhumanity. Or women's rights, right? Sometimes it might get very heated or sometimes there might be whatever, might happen.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's because for thousands and thousands of years, women were thought of as a property, and this and whatever.
Yeah.
When it comes to cultural work and when it comes to the Armenian world, I think there has to be an overcorrection. And in the case of Project Save, for me, luckily, that's very easy, and that's partly why I took the job. Project Save, at this point, as I said, is just an amazing photography archive.
Yeah.
And it's actually very easy to get non-Armenians interested because you know what? When I'm giving a talk, or when I put together we didn't have an advisory board, that it had gone defunct.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I did, luckily, I'm very grateful. It didn't take me that long to put together a wonderful brand new advisory board, mostly of non-Armenian experts at the Getty Museum in California, at the Smithsonian, from Harvard University, from Manhattan, a wonderful artist and photographer, a number of people. It didn't even take. I thought I was going to have to work for it a little more. When I pitched it to each one of them in my meetings, they were so blown away. And why were they blown away? Because I was showing them photo after photo, and what I was saying was, yes, the people in the photos might have Armenian heritage, but wait a minute, this is a photo from 1920 in Arlington, Massachusetts. Well, what is it exactly? It's also a photo of people who are American.
Yes.
People who are immigrants. When I show a picture of people in France in 1899, well, they're learning to be French, or they are French, and they are immigrants to France. I mean,
it's the story in the photo, and that's
and they're universal.
Exactly.
If I'm an American,
human story. Yeah.
Yeah. Most if you're not a Native American, you're an immigrant.
Yes. Okay? Exactly.
So that's one. They see themselves. Oh my God, yeah, my family came from Ireland in 1890, 1920. Oh my God, my family went from in World War I. My family had to run away from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they ended up in France. Oh my God.
Yeah.
People can see themselves in these stories.
Yeah.
If it's genocide, war, anything, right? I mean, the world is not Armenian. We live in a world. Yeah. So people have lost family members in World War I, in Vietnam. I don't know. There's all kinds of things interconnected. That's why we're humans. We're in a human history here. So that has been a blessing, and I credit Ruth and her work, because I think initially you're absolutely right. I think Ruth did the right thing in the 60s, 70s, 80s. That was also an overcorrection, right? Yeah. That was the period where in the United States, the whole idea of ethnic history was being born. We forget that that's fairly new. We think about just like civil rights. Yeah. But along with civil rights, up until the 1960s, where you had this kind of a countercultural movements and kind of all these types of movements, what were Armenians doing? Greeks, we had to kind of pretend to be just very white, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like
we're good at assimilating to other cultures.
Well, because we are white, right? I mean, exactly. so we're not quite white.
Indo-European.
but so what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't until really into the 60s where Armenians, Greeks, the Irish, right? The Irish for a long, they just had to mind their own business and kind of work their way up until they were really accepted by the more Protestant, white, WASP kind of American society, right? Yeah. So Ruth, like so many other cultural workers at that time, be it Hispanic, Black, Jewish, whatever, Polish American, all these people had to do an overcorrection, right? Mm-hmm. So Ruth spent all that time very much focused on the Armenian photos, the Armenian, only because they were Armenian, and her audience was Armenian. Right?
The Armenian experience.
That's right. And because that had to be done. That had to be done. We're thanks to her work and other people like her, we're very blessed now that I can take Project Save and I can put it really where it deserves, which is to be outside of that echo chamber. At this point, you're just preaching to the choir. Yes. So that's one. There's a tremendous amount of interest from historians,
Mhm.
sociologists, right? Oh, the other thing I started was we now have an artist residency and a research in residency. So
Wow.
so I invited our first artist in residence was a American Russian photographer, artist, and professor. No connection to Armenians,
Mhm.
but I loved his work. And logistically, at least starting out, it helped that he was in the Boston area. And we talked, and he spent some months in Armenia going through at Project Save,
Yeah.
going through our Soviet Armenian collection. So, in other words, there's been tremendous interest. And why is this important? As an executive director, obviously, you do have to think about sustainability.
Yes,
Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing my job.
exactly.
And I believe that it's uh, I can't speak for other Armenian organizations, but something like Project Save, it's just not sustainable. We can't keep existing year to year on a very, very negligible budget where you can only have one full-time employee, which is me,
Yes.
and two part-time archivists. I mean, we have a tremendous backlog of
Yeah.
work. There's a lot that we could be doing, and there's a tremendous impact, major impact we could be having.
Yeah.
That is very hard to do without proper resources.
Yeah.
So my decision making was that the more I can put Project Save on the map, just as a photograph archive, like any other important American photograph archive,
Mhm.
the more support it's going to get,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's it's baby steps.
Yeah.
But just in the past year that I've been there, I see tremendous change. I mean,
Yeah. That's great to hear. Yeah.
yeah,
Very encouraging. Like I said, the pictures tell a story. Everything nowadays is digital. You can take hundreds of pictures and it's just right there. You have to think back. These pictures, like you said, it showed the moments like 1925 or pre-genocide Armenians,
right.
or
Pre-genocide, right after the genocide.
exactly. So there's stories there, and you
I
look at
think,
these
yeah,
photos and you can see it on their
that's right.
faces
That's
and
I think
hold
it's
them.
that. Yeah, I think it's that, and also I think that it's again the reason I took the job was because I like the fact that Project Save in this space of cultural work, Armenian heritage cultural work. Um, it's one of the only concrete organizations. In other words, our mission is tangible.
Yeah.
Photographs. Period. That's it. That's it. It's not intellectual in the sense of like I don't want to give other organizations because I'm not criticizing other organizations. What I'm saying is Ruth has without maybe inadvertently without realizing she's laid the foundations for really such a universal product.
Yeah.
When I think of Project Save as a product, what could be more universal than visual images?
Yes.
Right? Instagram. So when I show people these photographs, even when they're not Armenian, I
Yeah.
don't have to read them a whole academic paper
Yes.
about, well, the genocide and the
Yeah.
Ottoman Empire.
The pictures say it all.
They're blown away by the
Yeah.
humanity of
Yes.
that's one. Two, when it comes to the Armenian world, I think these photos in the next couple of years, as I say, if we can get to where I want to get to, where we're much bigger and we have our own physical space and
Mhm.
whatever, we can do some bigger things. It's also, I hope, going to start shifting the diasporan mindset that we were
Yes.
talking about earlier. That, yes, look at these 19, like, let's put the genocide aside for one
Mhm.
second, right?
Yeah.
Look at these guys in England in 1890.
Mhm.
So before the genocide, look at these Armenians in Detroit in 1910.
Yes.
Look at these Armenians in, I don't know, Greece in 1892. So wait a minute. Oh, that's right. There was a whole vibrant Armenian world before the genocide.
Yeah.
And then, oh, look, here's a photo from 1920 25 in Pennsylvania. Here's one from Toronto. Here's 1950 in Waltham. Oh, so wait a minute. There was also, up to this day, a whole vibrant existence after the genocide. So again, I'm hoping it'll be a way very slowly to get Armenians out of this like
trauma. There's a trauma.
Oh, exactly. There's a little bit of trauma, and also the us and them.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing else. Yes, we lived in Waltham, but we didn't. What? Yeah, but you were American. You lived in Waltham. You became the fabric of America. Is America because of you. Yeah. Don't like undersell yourself. You know what I mean? Two things can be true at the same time. Yeah, you might have, maybe your parents, maybe your grandparents, maybe your great whatever. Of course, they might have felt like foreigners. They might have felt isolated. Yeah. Maybe they carried the trauma of the genocide, but also maybe they forget the genocide. Maybe before the genocide, they carried the trauma of any immigrant.
Yes,
having 2 nickels in their pocket, showing up in the United States and just trying to make a life for themselves. Yeah. So I think we have to we have to really big time expand the narrative we've been telling ourselves. And then because of that, telling other people. It doesn't do service actually to the real amazing story that the Armenian diaspora, the Armenian global experience is profoundly diverse. Every story is unique. There's all kinds of interesting things that have happened. And you're talking about in the course of the 19th and 20th century, obviously before then too, but we're just talking about photography here. Yeah. We're talking about, I don't know, how many millions of people that came and went that then were important contributors to European society, South American society, I don't know, Cuban society. I mean, we have photographs from China, Japan. I mean, I think it's very
it just shows the reach of Armenians and how much they contribute not just to their culture but to other cultures and
right. That's right, and vice versa, by the way.
Exactly, yeah.
Then we can celebrate. We can say, "Oh man, isn't that awesome? Armenians have done so many great things in Buenos Aires." Yeah. And isn't it great that Argentina has given so much to Armenian culture? Because of that, we have all these Armenian Argentinians, and now that's a part of Armenian global culture. You know.
I mean, for example, I was born in Beirut. Lebanon was one of the only places that opened its borders to Armenians because of genocide and all of that. And Armenians went there, including Syria, and we assimilated there. We brought our culture there, and our food integrated with their food, and all these good things came out of it. So it's just that's what basically the diaspora has to realize, how important they are to other cultures as well as our own culture. And
and in some ways, I always like to be a little more provocative with these things. In some ways, to realize they were more important. And I would say another way is to realize actually they weren't that important. I think Armenians could use a little bit
humble.
Healthy, not insecurity, because I think that's why they can't get out of their own way.
Yeah,
I think Armenians tend to be so insecure, and they just need validation. Please, America, recognize us and tell us we're great. Russia, please recognize. UN, recognize. Yeah. If they just were to say, you know what, Armenia is a country like any other.
Yes.
Armenians are like any other people. Yeah. Armenian history is beautiful. Armenian culture is beautiful. You know what? So is Korean culture and history. Yeah. There's a lot of ancient cultures and beautiful. I think, it would be very healing. I think it would heal a lot of things, I think, collectively in our psyche.
Yeah.
Maybe especially in the diaspora. I can't speak so much for Armenia. I don't know. But in the diaspora, I think it would heal a lot of things. And then I think it would be so much more productive, and the energy would be different when you can say, look, I'm a Polish Armenian, but I'm no longer I'm not fighting it. I'm not doing this weird schizophrenic thing. I'm Polish. I'm Polish Armenian. And I can get very involved. For example, the other thing that really was hilarious to me after not hilarious, but kind of like black comedy, kind of
Yeah.
tragic comedy. All these diasporan Armenians during the most recent Karabakh war, and then for 30 years of shambles in Armenia, right? Oh my God, these poor Armenians, what about their health care? They don't have or these children don't have proper schools and medicines and well, I mean, I'm always like, wait a second, do you know that your town of Philadelphia or New York or Boston or Cambridge or wherever, LA, do you know how many homeless people there are? Do you know how many children there are that can't afford a school lunch? I mean, like that, I find that, I don't know, to me, that's very problematic. It's
Yeah.
very problematic to sit on our high horses in the diaspora where we are fully integrated into these other societies. But then, year after year after year, we're sending money to Armenia. Fine, okay, do it. I question that a little bit. Year after year, just kind of sending money. I don't know. Okay, fine, go ahead. But number two, where are all those billions of dollars to help diasporan organizations?
Yeah.
Right? Not just like Project Save, but schools have closed down. Churches are not as vibrant as they used to be. I'm not particularly religious one way or the other, but churches have been a social gathering place.
Yeah.
Those have become, a lot of them have become weaker. Schools have closed down. The political parties at this point are more or less irrelevant to some extent in the diaspora. I mean, and I'm not saying this to be critical. I'm saying more critically in terms of the resources. You can't cry over a poor villager in Armenia, but not help your fellow American or your fellow Frenchman or your fellow whatever in the
Yeah.
host country where you have been for generations, or the diaspora community
Yeah.
where you are. Where if you're not going to move to Armenia, then
Yeah.
I don't understand what exactly is supposed to happen to
Yeah.
your kids and if they don't have a strong diaspora and institutional infrastructure. I don't even understand what like what it's
You know what
very
it is? In a way, it's like one hand washes the other.
right.
You're living in that community, you support that culture, that community, and in turn, they do the same to you,
That's
in
right.
your safety and your what. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started Mythology and Beyond. And
Yeah.
it's not just Armenian stories and legends I cover. I also cover different cultures, just
Yeah.
because I'm interested in that stuff. But
Right.
again, like their stories, the same as our stories.
That's
And
right.
by me being interested in other cultures will be interested in mine. And that's
It,
how it makes the whole thing.
that's great. I mean, we're all connected, right? So
That's
you know a lot about Armenian mythology than I do, but Armenian mythology, just like Armenian ethnicity,
Mhm.
didn't just drop out of the sky in a vacuum,
Yeah.
right? Whether Armenians, well, we're the first this, we're the first that, even if you are the first that, you
Mhm.
didn't drop out of the sky,
Yeah.
right? You
You're
you
still
live.
influenced by
That's
other,
right.
yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. We
Exactly.
were
Yep.
influenced by other cultures and they were influenced by us. What's the
Yes.
problem? I mean,
Yes.
it's beautiful.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's great. And especially something like mythology. I
Yeah.
think that's so beautiful because it totally exemplifies, you know, Greek gods have different names
Mhm.
in the Roman world.
Yes. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But Greeks and Italians don't have to be insecure. They're not insecure about it,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
They're both like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever. So what? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the beauty of mythology is, again, like you said, it's different names, but it's the same stories throughout every culture is telling the same story.
that's right.
And that was my point with that. Well, let's go back to Project Save and,
Sure.
before we end this.
Sure.
So what can we do as the public to help Project Save sustain itself besides just funding? I mean, what else do you need?
Well,
Funding is big, but
I mean, so, I'm going to give a very boring answer here, Greg, but I mean, obviously, there's the given, right? I mean, in terms of helping the mission, obviously, photographs. I mean, people should be in touch about any photographs they might have that they
yes,
want to think about preserving. Go to our website. There's ways you can engage with the website, so you can kind of
yes,
um, it'll give you a very good idea, give people a good idea of what we do and what we're about. But I have to say, I mean, the boring answer is, we're in a phase now where it is about
Yeah.
funding
Mm-hmm.
and it's about physical space. I could say that too. I mean,
Yeah.
we're very, we've had a very nice relationship with the Armenian Museum of America in Watertown, Massachusetts.
Yes.
So because Ruth had been running Project Save out of her home for many years, in the mid to late 90s, she rented a space in the building of the museum.
Yep.
So we have a collegial relationship with them. We're very grateful to them. It's all worked out, but again, it's not sustainable. We're very cramped. We don't have enough space. We don't have a gallery. I mean, these are photographs. We should be having exhibits.
Yes.
We're going to be doing workshops. We're going to be doing events. We can't. We can't really have visitors. I mean, yes, you could visit, but you're really just going to visit a little office.
Yeah.
Whereas to have a proper gallery, to have a proper little conference room where we can gather, to have our events. I mean, so it's just there's no way around it. Eventually, I feel very strongly that an organization like Project Save will be self-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, we will be able to have a combination of like an endowment, and we will be able to get some big grants. Because again, luckily, Project Save is concrete. It's photography.
Yes.
And it's photography related to American history and culture.
Yes.
Immigrant history and culture. There's a lot of ways that we can work with a lot of grant giving foundations.
Yes.
But in the short term, that's going to take some time.
Yes.
In the short term, the reality is, we kind of just scrape by, and that's not a sustainable model. All the things I've done in the past year with my staff that I'm so proud of and so grateful to, our archivists and to Ruth, I did these things on a shoestring budget. The website, these events, the artist residency, all this stuff. But going forward, it won't be that sustainable to just keep doing all these things on the same budget. So, I would just say to reach out. I would just say that's the thing. I would say for people, if they're interested, to reach out because the question you're asking is also dependent on the people I'm talking to, right? There could be a certain group of people that could be helpful in a certain way. For example, you're being helpful already by being very gracious and inviting me to talk about Project Save. And, there are just many people that either don't know about Project Save or they only know a little bit about Project Save.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I want to have you on, is just to get you out there. Your organization is so important. And
for example, the other thing, Greg, I'm sorry to cut you off. The other thing is there's a big misunderstanding that people think Project Save is Boston centric, right? And that's it's just not true at all. I mean, as I said, our photographs are, I don't know, we have tons of photographs from Fresno, from Detroit, from Vancouver, Canada, from Brazil. So we happen to be headquartered in Boston. So that would be the other thing as people get to know more about Project Save, and as I get out there more in front of people. As I say, I feel pretty optimistic. I think we're right now financially, we're going through a little bit of a growing pain in a good way, because Ruth had the foresight, right? She's hired more people. She's executive director, our archivist. That, resources are needed for that. But, my hope is that because it turns out that actually not many people know about Project Save, really. So I think the more people I get in front of, the more people hear about us, hopefully people that hear wonderful programs like yours, I'm hoping there'll be more people asking exactly what are ways we can help out, or what's a short-term need, what's a long-term need.
And it's funny, the reason I thought about Project Save was about a month ago, my grandmother took out this old picture of her parents. I never, ever knew about my great grandparents, their names are nothing.
Wow.
And I ended up visiting my grandmother over the Christmas holiday,
Oh,
and then she pulled me aside. She goes, "Reach into that drawer. I can't reach up there." And she told me, "Can you pull that picture out?" And I pulled this picture out, and it's obviously an old black and white picture
right.
my great grandparents, Krikar and Osanna Chobanyan. And,
Wow.
and I'm looking at it going, who are these people? And she tells me, she goes, these are my parents, your great grandparents. And that sent shivers down my spine because I've never known what they've looked like. And, I get emotional thinking about it.
Absolutely.
But to see that, and then and that's when I thought about you guys. It's like she's been hiding this in her closet
Yeah.
and nobody in the family knew about it. And she shared it with me, you know.
That's
Now,
beautiful.
what do I do with this picture? I
Yes,
have it,
yeah. So yeah, we would. So
but
and
yeah,
what I would say too, Greg, is because just to for a moment, I think it's probably important to talk about like the logistics a little bit
yes,
because that always comes up. It, not just in the Armenian community, but I think in a lot of communities that are immigrant communities and maybe communities where, like in the Armenian community, the Jewish community,
mhm,
the kind of whatever communities where there's been trauma,
yes,
kind of
mhm,
generational trauma.
yes,
People, the things like photograph, personal things like that,
yeah,
people can get a little bit nervous or paranoid. They feel weird. Like, why
exactly.
should I share it? Who
Yes,
cares?
yeah,
Why do you want it? Like, it's a little weird to some people, right? But luckily, technology has come along, right? So, um, a couple of things. Um, for example, that photo your grandmother showed you, luckily you can easily now yourself, right, with your iPhone or whatever, you
yes,
can quickly just digitize that.
yes,
So right now it's safe, right? So we always tell people first you do that, right? Because Project Save doesn't give copies, right? It's too much, it's way too involved to do all that. But because it's so easy these days, we tell people to go through everything, the things that are super personal that you may want to make sure uh, you go through with your iPhone or buy a little cheap scanner or whatever. There's so many ways now to do that.
yeah,
Digitize all those and then give it to Project Save. That's
okay,
one. Two, when people do give their photos, sometimes they might also get nervous of, well, what are you going to do with the photos? You know, people should know that when you give a photo to Project Save, there is no, even though Project Save does have the copyright, it's
yeah,
shared with the photo donor.
yeah,
So in other words, when you give your photo, if your photo from your family,
mhm,
we would share those rights with your family. So in other
okay,
words, we would use them for, whatever educational purposes,
yes,
or there might be a researcher or whatever.
mhm,
But also if you let's say you draw, you paint, you do stuff. Let's say you're going to do a book where you're going to have illustrations, whatever, and you're going to use your family's photos. But
yes,
the originals are at Project Save. So, there's no problem. All we would
yeah,
ask is that you just give credit, courtesy of Project Save, or whatever. So I think these little things are important to people
yes,
so that they know that other than being kept safe, we're not going to do anything crazy with these photos. But maybe more importantly, that if there's a photo donor, if there's a family that directly has given whoever has donated the photos, they also retain rights. As long as Project Save gets the credit as being the archive,
yeah,
people have rights, obviously,
yeah,
to their own photos. Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you, Arto. This was amazing. Thank you for all the information. It was truly a pleasure talking to you. Seriously, from your information about Armenia to all the way to Project Save. And now people know how to get in touch with you guys. I'll also leave a link at the bottom of the YouTube page. Thank you again. Thank you, Ruth. I want to say thank you to her for starting this.
No, thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate the time, and it was a real pleasure. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Same
it.
here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I look forward to visiting Project Save, and anything you guys need, you know who to reach out to. You
Thank
reach
you
out
so
to me,
much.
and I do want to be a part of it, and I want to help. And
My
it's
pleasure. Yeah.
small.
Come by sometime, and yeah, we can have a coffee or something.
Definitely. Thank
Wonderful.
you so much, Arto. Yeah.
Thanks, man. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for listening. Please check out Project Save by going to their website. It's a nonprofit organization and they need your support. If you are watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, like and share the channel. And if you are listening on Spotify, please follow us. I would also love to hear from all of you. You can leave a comment on the YouTube page or email me at gpvahan@gmail.com. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. So until the next episode, take care.